Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Chapter 802, Clones Talking. Making that brief contact with the cube almost destroyed ChatJK5, its sheer power and complexity something no normal entity could bear. But still, her advanced technological tactics and hacking allowed her to catch a slight peek at the hidden mechanisms inside. So, this cube allows objects and Unity to talk to each other? That's not the only thing it can do, but that's only what I could gather in the brief contact I had with it. This cube's real purpose was still completely shrouded in mystery. ChatJK5 was only able to get the answer to why only his Unity clones were able to elicit a reaction from it. Those objects that have been registered into the cube can communicate with each other, regardless of the distance. Michael then looked at his clones. So I guess touching the cube and having it glow golden means that they registered in its system. It finally made sense why the cube would only react during the first touch, and not on any other subsequent contacts. This meant that theoretically, his clones were now connected into the cube, and the cube connected all of them into a single system. However, since these were his personal clones, they already had a feature wherein they could talk to each other. In fact, there was no talking involved. He knew what every clone was doing at any moment. Each clone was already connected even without touching the cube. So what was the use for this cube? I'll try it out. He focused on one specific clone, the one who wasn't a magnetic, and ordered it to send a telepathic message to its clone brothers. Hello world. That was the most basic sentence he could think of. And as soon as this message left his mind and entered into the clone, its eyes suddenly lit up in a cool blue light before transmitting it into the other clones. Hello world. Hello world. Hello world. Hello world. Michael instinctually covered his ears in pain as he heard the message repeat in his mind a total of 10 times. Each one got more and more warped, becoming louder and higher pitched than the first one. It reminded him of the time in his previous life when he would speak into a mic and it would echo back at him and suddenly produce an annoying high-pitched noise in the karaoke machine. What the hell was that? The message was echoing. Your own self-contained communication and the cube's connection is clashing with each other. The two systems were clashing against each other, causing the original message to be warped. So this time, Michael turned off his own internal messaging system and simply just commanded his clone to try and speak psychically into the wind. He wasn't using magic nor any ability power. Hello world. And a few seconds later, hello world. It worked. This time, the message was properly transmitted towards all of his clones. It was a bit jarring at first, hearing a voice that seemed to come out of nowhere, but he got used to it after a few more tries. How does the communication even work? He asked himself. This time, he used his drone to see what happens to his clone once it starts communicating using the cube. Hello world. It was hard to notice at first, but with his drone he was able to see it clearly. As soon as that telepathic message was sent out, an invisible shockwave emanated out of the clone and into the field of mana in his surroundings. Then with his normal vision, he saw the shockwave eventually reach the cube. Once the message was absorbed, the cube then emanated its own shockwave within the mana field and directed it towards the Unity clones around. It's acting like a signal, he realized. After a few more experiments, he also realized that his messages were getting transmitted to all of his clones, even when he tried to target only one of them. Can I create a message system between only two clones? It is possible, but we would have to change the magic theory of the Unity clone. Michael and ChatJK5 designed his clones to act as a single unit. It was ingrained into its magic theory that there should be no distinction between any of them, meaning that communication between them all should be always open. This meant that the cube's communication system worked entirely based on the original sender of the message. If his Unity clones were meant to send voice messages to only one specific destination, then that's what the cube would follow. So, the cube's communication system can be customized, he realized. Immediately, numerous possibilities passed by his mind. ChatJK5, are you thinking what I'm thinking? Yes. Creating a modification on the clones. A few seconds later, a new magic theory washed over his mind. He quickly beckoned one of his clones to come closer, and with one hand on its head, he began casting an entirely new structure of magic. Immediately, a green magic circle appeared beneath the clone's feet. And strangely enough, the shapes and writing inscribed inside the magic circle was nothing like the traditional magic circles common in this world. Instead, there were straight lines pulsating with light that connected with differently shaped blocks with many colors. It looked like a circuit. The clone's eyes lit up with a prismatic light for a few seconds as its internal structure changed. Then a few seconds later, it subsided. He did the same for another clone and made the two stand opposite each other. Michael commanded the first clone to send a simple signal. The signal reached the cube and immediately bounced it to its destination. Suddenly, the clone's right arm glowed with a white light. It raised its hand and looked at its forearm. Written in prismatic light were the words, "Hello world." Smiley face. Michael approached the clone and couldn't help but smile as he looked at the results of his experiment. It was a breakthrough. As simple as it may be, that smiley face allowed him to see the true potential for this mysterious cube. This object was able to transmit not only sound, but also words and images. And according to ChatJK5, this communication was not limited by distance. It was wireless. If any other person from his previous world heard this description, they would already know the possibility for this cube. Michael could finally create an instant messaging device. He could create a phone. The cube could essentially replace the need for a traditional internet system. The cube was the internet. It could connect different devices and phones that Michael created with Unity. He became so excited that he couldn't help but pace back and forth. ChatJK5, is it possible? It is possible. Since the cube was entirely reliant on the data from the sender, this meant that as long as he changed the very code of the Unity object, then he could theoretically create apps that could deliver different messages. In this case, the code for the apps was the magic theory for the Unity object. He immediately wanted to get out of this place and start creating this new money-making project. Chapter 803 Phone. The reason why Michael hadn't created a smartphone all this while was because it was realistically too hard to execute. Creating the very hardware for the phone was easy. But what good would that do if he didn't have any internet or phone service? Recreating those systems was a huge undertaking, one that would probably take him years. But of course, he had plans to do that sometime in the future. Ideally, he wanted to do it when the nation of Reborn had spread through the entirety of the royal continent. That way, he knew he could build all the necessary structures for a society with smartphones and social media, like electricity for example. However, the discovery of this mysterious cube immediately got rid of this problem. All the phones created would connect to one thing, allowing a wide network that could span even the entire world if they wanted to. And since this phone would need Unity in order to connect to the cube, then it was theoretically limitless in power. It didn't need to be charged like normal smartphones. It could simply take the mana from the air or from its user in order to recharge. Of course, he still didn't know how exactly he was going to build a phone with Unity at its center. But the mere possibility of it made him excited. He approached the cube and grabbed it with both hands. He needed to take this cube with him when he left this place. Each phone needed to be registered inside it, after all. But where can I put it? Based on the sheer power inside it, he was basically holding a nuke in his hands. He had no idea if one single wrong move would make it go kaboom. He didn't want to find out. For now, the only place he could think of was his pocket dimension inside his drone. With one hand holding the cube by his side, he pushed on the miniature double doors on the drone's frame, immediately finding himself and the cube sucked into the pocket dimension. He landed inside the control room, a space filled with manual buttons to activate all the drone's features. The doors opened as he approached, allowing the vision of a large, untouched mountainside forest to open up to him. This pocket dimension was filled with nothing but greenery. Aside from plants, there were no other living beings inside. He had yet to do anything with this pocket dimension because there simply was no need to do it. The only thing in this place was a small hut he built for himself. It didn't take long for him to find himself in his wooden cabin. And as soon as he entered inside, he saw a small box with red velvet cushioning inside. "Ah, I forgot I had this," he said as he approached the box. Inside was a perfectly spherical object that was reminiscent of a pearl with a glittery galaxy floating inside. This was what Cthulhu gave him for helping Nixie. He never really found out what this object was used for, so it completely slipped his mind that he stored it here as well. Well, I guess this place will just be the place where I store mysterious objects given to me by a powerful entity. He made a similar box using the wood from the forest around him and placed it right next to the pearl. There, he gently placed the cube in the indentation he made. The cube floated a few inches off the velvet cushion and started rotating the same way it had when he first saw it. He breathed a sigh of relief after seeing the cube act normally. He was afraid that putting it in an entirely new environment would elicit a not-so-pleasant reaction, but it seemed he worried for nothing. Only once he ensured that both objects were safe and sound did he finally exit out of the forest and back into the control room. With the phone still lingering in his mind, He wanted to get out of this place as fast as he could. But as he entered the control room, the isolated room, caught the corner of his eyes. He remembered the dark wood. It had been a few days since his last visit to his farm because he was so busy with everything else. He quickly turned towards the isolated room and took a peek at the monitors right next to the door. All metrics were still colored green, meaning that the temperature, wind, water, and everything else inside was still at its optimal level for darkwood growth. Then, his eyes focused on the CCTV camera peeking inside. His eyebrows furrowed. The image was completely black. Worried that something had gone wrong with his darkwood farm, he quickly turned the wheel in the middle of the door and unlocked it. And with a slight push, he found himself getting sucked into the isolated room. Once his foot landed on moist soil, he looked around and found himself surrounded by massive growths of thick, intertwined wooden bark that almost took up the entirety of the room inside. No wonder the CCTV only showed a black screen. It was blocked. These thick growths spread around like a tree, with its roots and leafless crowns spreading outwards and occupying every single space left inside the room. Then, those thick intertwined branches slimmed down in the middle, making the whole thing look like an hourglass. It reached full maturity. According to the darkwood experiments he read back then, when darkwood reached their full maturity, they would grow large vineyard structures that spread like roots. There was even a sketched illustration that depicted the very thing he was looking at right now. This means that I can finally harvest my first darkwood. With excitement in his eyes, he walked through the thick wood-like vines cluttering the ground until he reached the center of the structure. The thin middle of this growth was where he was going to get his most awaited crop. Now, all he had to do was cut down the middle and open up the intertwined thick wood-like vines until he saw a similar but thinner strand of intertwined vines with a much darker hue. The book didn't talk much about the extraction process of darkwood. After all, they were barely even able to grow it past the first week. It only talked about how one must be incredibly delicate during the harvesting process. First of all these vine growths must not be damaged before the darkwood was extracted. After all, darkwood only got its famed strength, durability, and elasticity once they were completely out of their vines. Before that, it was vulnerable, meaning that any deaths within these vines would get transferred to the darkwood and contaminate the whole thing. Keeping all of these in mind, he carefully put his hands in between the thick vines and began to pull them apart, careful not to nick any of them. Then finally, he caught a glimpse of those dark and thin string-like vines inside. He grabbed it with one hand and immediately yanked it out in one swift move. Chapter 804, Towering Neighbor. Back in the real world, at the very moment Michael touched the antique, nothing happened. His hands carefully grasped the rough surface of the bone and remained there, frozen. His eyes stared deeply into the antique, as if he was trying to solve something in his mind. A few seconds passed, and this small pause turned from normal to a little bit strange. "Kuhahaha. History nerds are so weird," exclaimed Zoviru. For him, he saw nothing but a boy so obsessed with the antique that he seemed to be frozen in time trying to unearth the mysteries of the world. Katerina stared at Michael, her eyes gazing over his eyes. Now, this shouldn't seem strange to her. She had seen her father make the exact same face whenever he was too busy trying to study an important historical artifact. And since Kyo was his protege, it wasn't a stretch to say that he inherited his weird studying antics. However, there was something weird with Michael's actions, or more importantly his lack of one. His eyes remained stagnant in one place, his gaze looking through a deep distance. It seemed as if he wasn't even actually looking at the antique, but rather dazing off. "I didn't think that he would be so brave," Zoviru said. "Even I felt a little prick when I first touched it. But he didn't even flinch, ha 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 ha." Katerina's eyebrows raised. "Prick? Any person that touches this antique will get their blood taken," Zoviru explained. "It's some kind of test or something." Katerina kept her expression neutral, but on the inside, she was freaking out. Her organization has been gathering lots of information about the history of the ancient era. And whenever there was something from that era that pricked the blood of whoever came into contact with it, they would always turn out to be an extremely precious artifact. As far for why, they had only one clue: unity. That was the only power that could be seen through blood. And as she looked at Michael frozen in place, she couldn't help but think of a scenario in her head. His 1,000-yard stare, his staticness. Was it possible that he was making contact with the antique? Her eyes imperceptibly flashed with a violet light as she began to look at Michael for any signs of changes in his body. She scanned him and the bone he was holding. Yet, even with her nascent spirit realm cultivation, she couldn't see anything out of the ordinary. Perhaps she was mistaken. If there was something happening with him and the antique, she would have seen it with her own eyes. And with that, her doubt vanished. Kyo simply was following in the footsteps of the professor and became so engrossed with the antique that it seemed that he was dazing off into nowhere. But in truth, another possibility slipped her mind. a possibility that the power inside the bone beyond the nascent spirit realm was actively hiding any activity to the outside. She would have never thought of this because that kind of power was beyond the realm of her current understanding. It would turn the antique from a mild importance to a critical one. So, blissfully unaware, she approached Michael, raising her hand to nudge him awake. But just as she did, they suddenly heard a knock that echoed inside. Zoviru and Katerina both turned to look towards the entrance of the tower, peering through the mounds and mounds of gold and jewelries with their powers until they saw a clear vision of who was outside. Just on the front steps of Zoviru's draconian tower was a middle-aged man with a hunched back and a worried look on his face. Bastien, Zoviru muttered out loud with an obvious look of confusion in his face. He flew above the mounds of gold and directly headed over to the door. Katerina saw the look on Zoviru's face. Whatever matter this was, it was of utmost importance. She had to know. So, she turned to follow him over the dragon's hoard and reached the portal to the outside. Before she left, she turned to look back at Michael, who was still frozen in place, both hands holding onto the antique. Then, she exited the portal. Once she was outside, she found Zoviru and Bastien conversing with each other. "What's the matter?" she asked quite rudely. Zoviru didn't seem to mind and answered, "This is Bastien. He's my butler in charge of my matters here in the royal continent." It wasn't unusual for Draconians to have servants, so Katerina wasn't fazed. "Master Zoviru, there seems to be quite a bit of a problem with your neighbors," Bastien said, nervously rubbing his hands. "Neighbors?" Zoviru looked around him, his gaze reaching through the different dragon towers in his midst. "What about them?" They've found another one, sir." Zovirus' chaotic red eyebrows raised, before his smile widened. "Ho-ho? They found another one? Are you sure?" Bastien nodded. "Yes, master. It's another bone." This time, Katerina couldn't help but sneak into their conversation. "Another bone? Don't tell me. It's another antique." She wasn't letting her true feelings reach her face, but on the inside, she was getting more and more agitated. Somehow, their business with New Sparta was getting a lot more complicated than what they first thought. If what Bastien said was true and that they found another antique, then it would be of utmost importance for her to obtain it as well. Perhaps their organization would have to devote more members in New Sparta in order to keep up with the developments here regarding the antique. "But you're too late, my dear Bastien. My interest in the antique has already waned. I have no need for another one." After hearing this, Katerina immediately spoke up. "If you don't want it, then I will get it." Zoviru waved her off. Sure. Bastien, tell the professor's colleague what you know about the antique." Bastien turned towards Katerina and bowed. "Mistress, it is unfortunate to say, but the owner of the antique can be, well, he can be like Master Zoviru. Draconians have a tendency to hoard, after all. Unlike the generosity of my master, this Draconian is quite closed off from the matters of the world. They are hard to communicate with and will turn away anyone, no matter who they are." Zoviru scoffs. "I'm not generous. I'm just bored." Katerina ignored him and kept on pestering Bastien for more information. "Then how can we contact them?" "It will be hard," said Bastien. "As we speak, there are numerous entities trying their hardest to speak with this Draconian. However, they will all fail. After all, they do not know the ways of the Draconian. In order to contact them, one must give them something as a gift." Katerina nodded. Not to brag, but she was probably at the same level of wealth as Zoviru and the other Draconians. She had many extravagant gifts she could part ways with if it meant getting a meeting with this Draconian. "It's not any precious stone or artifact," Bastien said. "It's a group of people. This certain Draconian has some interest with the elves." As soon as he said that, Katerina's shoulders slumped in disappointment. Chapter 805 Vague Silhouette. This certain Draconian has been trying to communicate with the elves, but they have always remained unbothered with his efforts. Now, if you were to give the Draconian what he wanted from the elves, then he'd be more than willing to let you into his quarters, and possibly even gifted the antique in return. He doesn't seem keen on keeping it, only using it as a bargaining chip. If there was one thing that Katerina couldn't do, then that was interacting with other people. She had been described as brash, unfriendly, and antisocial by almost anyone she met. After all, being trained inside the organization left her isolated from most of her peers. All she had was her cultivation, and that was what led her to achieve the nascent spirit realm in such a young age. If she had to fight the elves, then she could do it. But talking with them and asking them for a favor, that was almost impossible. The elves were notorious for being isolated as well. Their kingdom was located on the opposite side of the world, which was completely different from life here in the royal continent. Because of that, they often disliked anything that wasn't made by their own kind. This made it hard for merchants and others to cater to the elven market. They had extremely high standards, even more so than the mermen. The elves? Zoviru asked with a little bit of a chuckle. Good luck. I suggest you go digging in the ground for darkwood now because it's going to take you years. Of course, everyone knew that the elves wanted nothing more than to retrieve all the darkwood left in the royal continent. They were unable to grow one themselves, so they resorted to simply dig around for artifacts from the ancient era. Katerina bit her lips. It seemed like the only way she was going to get a meeting with the elves was if she gifted them darkwood in return. She didn't have one herself, but with the resources from her organization, it would only be a matter of time until she found one. But the problem was, would that be enough? Perhaps there were already multiple people with the same mindset she had. They were trying to curry favor with the elves in order to get to the Draconian and his antique. Where am I going to get darkwood? She pondered, and in that moment, the red portal behind them shimmered as a golden-haired boy walked out with a serene look on his face. What did I miss? Michael asked them with a smile on his face. After successfully ripping out the darkwood from the thick branching vines, Michael immediately left the control room and found himself back on the strange island. He didn't stop to destroy the shriveled-up vines after harvesting. He would only do that after he was out of this place. Once he found himself back on solid ground, he piloted his drone to look around the island one last time to make sure he hadn't missed anything. After double-checking, he walked over to the edge of the island and looked down, seeing nothing but a complete dark void below. Are you sure this will take me back? He asked Harbinger. I'm sure. If it's not, then oops, my mistake. I'm kidding. Safe, Harbinger assured. Either way, Michael had no other idea how to get out of this place, so this was his only option. He was ready to step out and fall into the deep chasm, when something suddenly caught his eye. He turned to the side and saw something he hadn't seen before. In the distance, he saw the vague silhouette of another island. After using his drone vision, he was even more sure that what he was seeing wasn't an illusion. There really was another island about a few hundreds of kilometers away from this one. That wasn't here before. When he surveyed the island with his drone, he made sure to look everywhere for any signs of structures even in the deep black void. And he never saw anything so auspicious. This island only popped up recently, probably after completing the obelisk's test. If that island is the same as this one, then does that mean that it also has an obelisk? He squinted and tried his hardest to peer through the immense distance, but something within the void was preventing him from using any of his magic. All he could see was a vague figure of an island floating in the deep dark chasm. But in all likelihood, it seemed that his guess was correct. It was safe to assume that that island also had a treasure or an inheritance as valuable as the strange cube he obtained. Otherwise, why would it appear in his vision now? It seemed all too deliberate for him to suddenly see the island right when he was about to leave this place. But why would you show me this if I can't reach it? If he tried to fly there, he would only get sucked into the void and be teleported out of this place forever. There was no going back. So, it seemed as if the creator of this obelisk was just toying with him. Still, it wouldn't hurt to try. Mana began to burst out of his soles like a rocket, allowing him to fly to the air. And once he gathered enough momentum, he shot forth towards the other island. But as soon as he reached the threshold, he felt an immense suction force pulling him downwards. It grabbed onto his physical body as well as his soul, transporting him into an entirely different place. His vision turned black, body numb. And a few seconds later, he found himself tumbling forwards and landing face first into a pile of gold coins. Ah! He groaned before looking around. He found himself back inside Zoviru's tower, hoard of priceless golden trinkets all around, and a giant white tibia bone lying right next to him. Nothing had changed within the antique even after that experience, making it seem as if nothing had even happened at all. His hands grasped it again, fingers going across the cuts. But nothing. It didn't prick him for his blood, nor did it transport him into that other island. Despite obtaining such a powerful object like the Internet Cube, Michael still wanted to visit the other island to see what it had to offer. Call it greed or curiosity, he just couldn't help but think of what other item was hidden inside that space. But with no answer available to him, he decided to go out of the tower and meet up with the others. What did I miss? He asked Katerina. She looked back at him, her eyes not hiding her piercing gaze. Nothing changed that much with Kyo, but there was an imperceptible glint in his eyes that alluded to a substantial change inside him. It's another antique, Katerina said. Oh, but it's going to be impossible to obtain, said Bastien. Unless we get the cooperation of the elves, we won't be able to contact the Draconian who owns it. We need darkwood. Oh! Chapter 806. To the elves. The appearance of another antique explained the distant island he saw in the black chasm. That vision seemed to allude to where he would end up if he was able to touch that antique. Is there some kind of connection between the two? Will I be able to find out more about the cube once I get there? Are there more antiques? So many questions filled his mind. But that last question in particular was a little bit easy to guess. After all, what was the antique? It was a tibia bone of a mythical beast in the ancient era. It wasn't far-fetched to think that a beast of that size had tens, maybe even hundreds of bones. If so, was it possible that each one of them led to an island designed by its creator to find an inheritor? Probably not. If there are hundreds of these antique, then it would have been a lot more common in this place. Either way, he was only going to get the answer if he was able to find that bone and reach the second island. Then what are we waiting for? We should go get that antique right now, he urged Katerina. Didn't you hear what we said? It's going to be impossible to sway the elves on our side without giving them something valuable in return. Michael waved off her concern. It's fine. Let's just go there before we're too late. He walked out with a confident stride, not waiting for any response from Katerina. This befuddled her completely. It seemed that touching the antique really did have an effect on Kyo. It made him more impulsive. Ha 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 ha. I like your style, young man. Zoviru praised. Bastine. Tell them where to find the elves. Zoviru's loyal butler gave Michael the directions to the elven territory in New Sparta, which was on the other side of the werewolf territory, making it a bit of a trek. Meanwhile, spurred on by Michael's go-to attitude, Katerina decided to humor his actions for now. After some thought, she realized that it wouldn't be too bad to talk with the elves and see the current situation in their territory. But before they left, she made some arrangements with Zoviru about the antique. Zoviru, one of my colleagues, will be here to pick up the antique a little while later. They'll transport the item to the professor so that he can study it with a closer look. Hearing this, Michael kept quiet. Just as he thought, their mysterious organization was keen on obtaining the antique for further study. He was glad that neither she nor Zoviru found out about his recent visit to the island. He'd been playing it off cool, but he was actually worried that they saw something happen when he touched the antique. He even thought that they would be waiting for his return and question him relentlessly about what he found. But thankfully, it seemed that they were none the wiser. They didn't even mention the antique to him, so they probably thought that he didn't elicit a reaction from it, just like everyone else who came into contact with the antique. If Katerina found out, there was no doubt in his mind that she would ask a lot of questions about the antique. With her nascent spirit realm cultivation, it was very probable that she had some kind of technique to discern truth from lies. So, he'd have to reveal the cube to her, which he wasn't very keen on since she would probably want to take it back to their organization for study and safekeeping. Although he didn't think that she was evil or anything, he wanted to keep the cube to himself for now since his whole phone manufacturing plan hinged on having the cube to himself. The only one he trusted with the cube was the professor. So unless he appeared right now and asked for it, he would never tell anyone else about its existence. That was why he wanted to get out of this place as soon as possible. He didn't want the antique to suddenly have a reaction and reveal his secret. So once Bastine told him the elves' location, he immediately headed out and followed the map, with Katerina following closely behind. And while they were walking through the boundary, ignoring the peddlers trying to sell them trinkets for a few sand dollars, Katerina walked up right next to Michael and asked a question. What did you find out about the antique? It looked like you were engrossed in studying it. He kept a straight face. I tried to decipher the cuts on its surface, but my understanding was shallow compared to the professor's. Not wanting to linger on the subject, he threw a question back at her. I thought there was only one antique. Are there more besides the one we're trying to get? Katerina turned silent for a moment, trying to censor her words so as not to reveal any of her organization's secrets. Yes. The professor was aware that there may be multiple pieces to the antique. He even said that connecting them all will result in a big secret to be revealed. Michael scratched his head and put on a disarming smile. That school of yours, what was it called again? The professor never told me. You know him. He's too busy with finding the secrets of the world to answer some trivial questions. Ha ha ha. Katerina looked at him, her eyes deep and contemplative. It looked like she was on the verge of telling him the name, but chose to keep her silence at the last second. It's just a name, he said. Why can't you tell me? She kept quiet before suddenly stopping in her tracks and pointing forwards. We're here, she said. Michael looked ahead and saw a bountiful forest filled with mysterious greenery and vegetation. The vines and plants looked alien and otherworldly. Damn it, he cursed. She's saved by the bell again. They've arrived at their destination, giving Michael no chance to ask any more questions. Looks like you were right, she said. There's already a lot of people here. Just beyond the boundary and a few meters into the forest, Michael and Katerina saw a couple of groups camping out in tents and makeshift hammocks. They seemed to be waiting for something. According to Bastine, the elves had a lot of visitors already wanting to curry favor. Michael and Katerina walked forwards, drawing the looks of the people who were already in their own camps. There was no hostility in those eyes, but Michael could see wariness from their gazes. It was a competition for the elves' attention, after all. There, Katerina pointed in the distance. Just beyond the shrubbery was an elf holding a scroll in her hands and talking to a group of human adventurers. The humans were speaking a little bit loudly, making big gestures and impassioned pleas, while the elf could only shake her head disappointedly. They approached, making the elf and the adventurers turn their heads towards them. "Who are you? Can't you see that we're busy talking with the elf here? First come first serve, so get out." Chapter 807. Selling Darkwood. Katerina's head turned reddish as anger started to build up within her. She was a nascent spirit magnetic. This disrespect cannot be tolerated. The only reason why he's still standing on his feet was because she was keeping her identity a secret. But if he kept up with that attitude, she was going to have to reveal her true power. Eventually, Katerina composed herself. She took a big breath and grabbed Michael's shoulder. "Let us go for now. We will meet with the elves at an appropriate time. They'll be much more receptive to us once we have what they need." But Michael remained in place and listened to the conversation between the angry adventurer and the elf. "We've been here for 2 days now. We just want to meet with the elf in charge of this place," said the brash adventurer, bashing his giant shield on the ground. The elf remained steadfast despite the pressure. "Like I said, our Lady Farron has yet to return. It will take a few more days before she arrives in New Sparta. There are more important people that deserve it." After hearing those harsh words, the adventurer could only back away in annoyance. Once he was dealt with, the elf turned to Michael. "Are you here to schedule a meeting with Lady Farron as well?" He nodded. "Yeah. How long would that be?" "You are the 100th in line, so you're scheduled to meet with her about a month from now," she said as she looked over her scroll. "A month? That's too long. He met Farron before and they were very friendly with each other. If she was here right now, he wouldn't have to wait that long." Unfortunately, she was still a few days away from arriving in New Sparta, according to the elf. "Are you going to go with the schedule or not?" asked the elf. "If not, I'm going to have to give your schedule to somebody else." Michael changed his approach. "Can you tell Lady Farron that I want to talk to her instead?" The elf sighed and shook her head. "I've heard that before. Lady Farron's time cannot be wasted." "Next." "Don't worry," Katerina said. "My school will provide Darkwood for us in a couple of weeks." Just as the elf gestured for the next group of adventurers to approach her, Michael reached down into his pockets and pulled it out for the elf to see. In his hands was a thin strand of intertwined wood-like vines wrapped neatly around his palm. The elf's ears twitched, her superior sense of hearing catching on to the unique sound of the Darkwood's vines rubbing on each other. She immediately turned to look at his palms, her eyes widening at the sight. That's... The elf gasped. Even Katerina couldn't keep her composure. She stared at the Darkwood in Michael's hands, confusion written all over her face. Even she knew that the Darkwood in his hands was genuine. "I was planning on selling this to Lady Farron. Would you be able to tell her about this?" he asked the elf. But it seemed that she was far too flustered to see Darkwood with her own eyes that she completely lost the ability to speak. It was only when Michael waved at her face and caught her attention did she finally wake up from her stupor. "Forgive me for being rude. I never thought that you had Darkwood in your possession. The Elven Kingdom would be more than willing to buy that Darkwood off your hands," she said, her fingers slowly creeping in towards the Darkwood. But before she could get a grasp on it, Michael took it back. "But this gives me priority on a meeting with Lady Farron, correct?" The elf nodded her head fervently. Yes. I shall notify Lady Farron of your presence as soon as she arrives in New Sparta," she promised. Only then did Michael hand over the Darkwood towards her. The elf carefully wrapped the Darkwood on her belt, making sure to secure it tight. "Please follow me back to the Elven territory. We shall reward you handsomely for your efforts," said the elf, giving Michael a respectful bow before gesturing for him to follow her inside. Of course, the previous brash adventurer saw this and couldn't help but complain about the injustice that befell him. "Hey, what gives? We got here first, but he's getting a meeting before us." The adventurer approached Michael, his shield and his giant hammer by his side for maximum pressure. But instead of cowering, Michael remained tall and looked up at the adventurer with no fear in his eyes. "This is unfair. How is he invited to the Elven territory but we are forced to make camp outside?" The elf immediately glared at the adventurer. Now that Michael had given them Darkwood, he was now considered as an important guest within the Elven Kingdom. There would be no disrespect towards him that would be tolerated. But just as she was about to retrieve her bow, Michael raised his hand at her, gesturing for her to stop. Then he looked up at the adventurer. "It's their choice," he said. "What? You're just a puny punk." The adventurer raised his shield and bashed it towards Michael, intending to push him around a little bit to teach him a lesson. But suddenly, Michael disappeared from his sight, only to reappear behind the adventurer. This caused the adventurer to stumble forwards, head scratching the ground and his weapons clattering away from him. Flustered, he immediately tried to get back up. "You!" He punched towards Michael, but instead of dodging, Michael raised his hand and caught the punch. His hand was definitely considered puny compared to the adventurer. But as soon as the punch landed on Michael's palms, its momentum completely stopped. "What?" Michael caught his arms and twisted it, breaking his bone immediately. The adventurer winced in pain before Michael pushed him forward, launching him back several feet, his head bashing onto a tree and rendering him unconscious. Chapter 808. Compensation. Silence reigned inside the forest after seeing the adventurer get handled so easily by a 13-year-old boy. Whoa! Who was that kid? How did he beat that guy? He's a renowned adventurer, you know? Those that were about to complain had no choice but to keep their words to themselves. They didn't want to get their head knocked out as well. Meanwhile, Katerina was even more surprised than any of the people around them. He can fight? Those movements were quick, fast, and accurate, as if it was done by someone experienced in battles. She always thought that he was a nerd, just like her father. Historians like them had no time in their lives to sharpen their fighting skills. From what she saw, his use of an air spell to make himself extremely fast was even better than those magicians from the Guild of Arcana, which was very surprising. There was even barely a formation of a magic circle before he propelled himself almost at the speed of sound. Is that why my father recruited him? Perhaps it was because of the combination of his air magic talent and his historical knowledge that the professor deemed him worthy enough to be his protege. After seeing such disrespect from the adventurers, the elf had him and the rest of his party escorted out of the forest, never to be seen again. "I'm sorry for that," she said, bowing in a 90-degree angle. "Now please follow me back to our territory." With the elf guiding them, Michael and Katerina became one of the few privileged people invited into their homes. And as they walked, Katerina asked him a question. "Where did you get Darkwood?" Even their organization would find it hard to scout for Darkwood in such a small amount of time. At the very least, they'd need 2 weeks, and even then it was only by pure luck. No one could tell if a tomb had Darkwood buried in it. "I happened upon it by chance," he replied to her, and nothing more. After walking down for a few more minutes, they finally arrived at the elven territory. Michael found himself looking up at houses perched upon extremely tall trees high above in the skies. Many of them seemed inaccessible to normal humans, since they didn't have any stairs that led upwards. Each of the houses were connected by hanging wooden bridges that strangely didn't sway as the wind blew past them. This was a connected network of tree houses. He saw elves hanging their wet clothes through a string tied along branches. He saw elves practicing their archery, shooting down at a red target painted with berries. He even saw some elves playing around and swinging through the vines like a certain webbed superhero from his previous life. "Please come this way," the elf said, taking Michael's attention away from the village above. "We're not going up?" he asked her. The elf shook her head. "Unfortunately, our residential district is still prohibited from foreigners," she said. "For now, I can only take you to our central building where we do business with outsiders." She then led Michael and Katerina towards the thickest tree in the forest, with a building carved on the inside. Everything seemed to be made out of one wood, the railings, the door, and the windows. Michael was surprised at the level of handicraft that the elves had. It was even beyond what people in the modern world could create. "Please wait here for a moment," the elf said as she raised her bow and took out a special arrow from her quiver. This arrow had a thick string tied on its end. Then, she aimed it above and shot it immediately, hitting a branch that contained a house above. With a single tug, the elf launched upwards, landing perfectly on the balcony of the house. "So that's how they get up." After a few seconds, the elf came out with another elf, and they came down on the stringed arrow still stuck on a branch. Once they landed, the new elf bowed his head towards Michael. "I deeply thank you for your contribution to the Elven Kingdom," he said. "I have with me a small token in exchange for the Darkwood that you have imparted upon us." He pulled out a very large pouch from his pockets, brimming to the top with something plentiful. Michael's eyes widened as he heard that click-clack as the things inside the pouch rustled. Those were sand dollars. He had never seen a pouch so full with sand dollars that it could almost burst out. He didn't even have any time to estimate how much was inside before the male elf walked forward and handed it to him. He felt the weight of the sand dollars in his hand and knew that this was the most he'd ever had in his entire life. "The Elven Kingdom is willing to give 200,000 sand dollars in exchange for any Darkwood that you retrieve for us," the elf said with a wide smile. Michael stared at the pouch. 200,000. He knew that he could sell Darkwood for a pretty penny given the elves' need for it. But he never knew just how much he could earn from it. This was equivalent to 20 drops of sue, or 20 kilograms of Godforge pieces. If all went well with his farm, He could earn a reliable 200,000 sand dollars every month from Darkwood, and that wasn't even taking in the fact that he could possibly expand the farm to even more Darkwood seedlings per harvest. If there was an option to upgrade the isolated room into something bigger, and there probably was, then he would spend as much sand dollars as he could in order to plant more Darkwood. It was a worthy investment, seeing as he could earn 200,000 sand dollars per item. The potential for this was endless. "I appreciate this," he said to them. "It is our pleasure," said the male elf. "This is an incentive so that others would be more willing to retrieve Darkwood for us. Lady Farron does not skimp on money for it." Michael nodded. "Well, if I have more, I certainly know who to give it to," he said. The elves laughed, thinking that Michael was joking. He wasn't the first person who sold Darkwood to them. Many made it their life's mission to hunt down more Darkwood for a chance to get a sizable profit, but they never succeeded that well. At most, people would get lucky once, and that was it. So, when Michael said those words, they considered it as nothing more than a hopeful wish. "We will notify Lady Farron of your presence," said the female elf. "You can return here in a few days and we can get you a meeting with her." Michael thanked them again and turned to leave. His mind was still focused on the pouch of sand dollars in his pocket and how he could make it double in size. "Okay, I'll be back," he said, waving them goodbye and walking back the way they came. "Tell Farron I asked how the compound bow is holding up." Chapter 809, Prepping Unity. For a brief second, the two elves' eyes displayed a sense of wonder and amazement as their memories thought back to their kingdom's relic, the compound bow. Ever since Lady Farron brought it to their village, every elf has been entranced by its capabilities. Its power and accuracy could not be beat, even by the bows made by the greatest craftsmen in the Elven Kingdom. They were now treating it as their national weapon, something that should be passed down through different millennia. The two elves were so entranced by the compound bow that they completely spaced out for a few seconds. By the time they regained their stupor, Michael and Katerina were already gone. So, with their visitors gone, the two elves immediately scaled up the giant tree with their stringed arrows and arrived at Lady Farron's household. There, they entered the safe room where they stored all of their village's most important items, including the Darkwood they amassed while they were here in the royal continent. They opened a chest, revealing rows and rows of carefully knotted Darkwood sitting on a comfortable cushioned lining that was emanating a slight mystical yellow glow. There were tens of them on just this chest alone, with only one empty spot remaining. The female elf reached down her belt and untied the Darkwood they received from Michael and carefully placed it in their secure containment. And as all the Darkwood was displayed neatly inside the chest, the two elves nodded with a satisfied look. All the Darkwood arranged here were all completely identical, except one. The Darkwood that Michael gave the elves had a little bit more of a darkish color than the others, almost imperceptible from normal view. Not only that, but the creases on the wood-like vines were a lot smoother than the others, as if it hadn't dried out after 1,000 years of being buried in the ground. It looked fresh. The male elf scratched his head, confusion written all over his face. Then he turned to look at the window. Wait, how does he know about the compound bow? Michael and Katerina exited the elven forest, returning back to the boundary between the different regions. The sun had already set, with the stars already visible in the night sky. "I will be returning to my school for the time being, but I will return once Lady Farron has arrived," Katerina said, bidding him goodbye. "All right," he replied. Even he wanted to relax and become Michael again. Not Kyo. Katerina turned to leave, but turned around again to face him. "I will tell you if we find anything," she said. "What?" "The antique," she replied, looking at Michael weirdly. Without the professor, Kyo was the only chance for Katerina to find out what was happening with the antique. She needed him to focus. The antique should have been top priority for a protege historian like him, but he didn't even seem remotely interested in the antique after only having brief contact with it. "Oh yeah, sorry, I'm a bit tired after all that," he said. Katerina nodded, understanding his excuse. "All right, rest for a few days. I need your help with the second antique." And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving Michael alone in the middle of the street. He secretly tried to watch her using his supreme talent, watching her light mana to see where she would go. But she couldn't even see her at all because of her nascent spirit cultivation. Her body was defended by ability power. So once he was sure she was gone, he made his way home. Once he was back in the comfort of the nation of Reborn, he immediately got to work. He promised Katerina that he would rest, but he just couldn't sleep given how many things he had to do. First though, he wanted to arrange his Darkwood farm. He entered back into the isolated room and found wilted vines all around. What used to be a plentiful growth was now less than half its size and very brittle to the touch. With a little bit of air and water magic, he cleaned up the decayed plants and readied the soil for a new harvest month. It was quite a laborious task, given that he had to plow every single inch of the soil. The roots of Darkwood spread far underground, making it unstable and prone to caving. Once he stomped it down, he checked on all of his equipments: the fans, the watering spouts, the light sources, etc. After refilling the water tank with natural non-magic water, he made a little trip to a certain mushroom store in Metropolis. He needed morel spores as fertilizer for Darkwood. Thankfully, the old man had a month's supply of it and he was able to purchase it easily. Though it was not without some prodding about having another mushroom trip, which he politely declined. Once he had the spores, he spread it around the soil just like last time. Then finally, he took out a single strand of Darkwood from his pockets. Before he sold it off to the elves, he made sure to reserve a few strands as his seedlings for future harvests. Then, he dug a little hole in the middle of the soil and planted the seedling inside. After making sure all the parameters were correct, he exited the isolated room. All he had to do now was wait. If all went well, he'd have another 200,000 sand dollars next month. If he didn't have anything else to do, he would have been extremely impatient with the Darkwood. Thankfully, he had other business to attend to. Specifically, his new project, the smartphone. This was an incredibly huge undertaking, especially because he and ChatJK5 needed to find out the parameters of the cube's activation. Shall we start on our experimentation? Ready as ever, ChatJK5 replied. He exited out of the control room and entered into the main pocket dimension of the drone, finding himself in the middle of a bountiful mountain forest. After traveling for 100 meters, he landed in his cabin where he stored the cube and the pearl. He opened the door and found the two boxes at the same place he left them. He looked down at the cube, which was still rotating as it floated a few inches off the velvet lining of the box. Thankfully, nothing had changed. Now, I need to test how we are going to make a Unity phone. Since Unity was the only one that activated the cube, he needed a phone where it worked entirely on that. The problem with that was the fact that his mastery of Unity was very basic. All he knew was the Unity gun and the Unity clones. The complexity and the volatility of Unity made it hard to improvise on its spell. One wrong move could send a terrible explosion that knocked everything away in a kilometer-wide radius. How are we going to do this, ChatJK5? Let us start with its power supply, Michael. That was a great idea from ChatJK5. He planned for the smartphone to be limitless in energy. And to achieve that, he needed to use the Unity power source. Chapter 8:10, Making a Phone. Although Michael called it a battery, in truth, it was actually just a bomb that was a lot less volatile to explode. Back when he was first experimenting with Unity, he found that if he created a small enough sample with all 8 elements, it wouldn't just explode outright with the smallest of bumps. Could give a reliable source of limitless energy. The only downside this had was the amount of power that could be produced, making it useless for things that needed lots of electricity like refrigerators, cars, etc. It was only used as a battery for small trinkets like the Reborn watches and flashlights, and it just so happened that it was perfect for a smartphone. Michael raised his hand, motes of light gathering at his palms. All 8 mana swirled in the air above before shooting down towards his hands, gathering into a small clump of prismatic light. A single bead of sweat poured down his forehead. His eyes filled with concentration as the motes of light started to shake and vibrate. It was always dangerous during this phase. Finally, Michael used his supreme talent to create an immense pressure that began the crystallization process of the Unity. A few seconds later, the light dimmed and created a marble-like solid with a prismatic gleam. With this crystallized Unity in his hands, the phone's power source was finally created. Let's see if this works, he said as he moved the crystallized Unity towards the cube. As soon as it made contact, the cube emanated a golden glow and began spinning at 3 times its normal rate. It had successfully registered with the cube. What now? The Unity power source can now send signals back and forth through all the other entities registered within the cube. He then summoned all 5 of his Unity clones, but they remained silent. They weren't receiving any signal from the power source. It's because it hasn't been turned on, he realized. He teleported back into the nation of Reborn and retrieved a single light bulb and brought it back to the drone's pocket dimension. Then, he attached the Unity PS, power source, on the bottom of the bulb, making it light up instantly. And in that moment, Michael finally received a signal with his Unity clones. They all heard a constant buzzing sound, similar to the sound of electricity running through an open ground. If the light bulb was turned on, then it would emit a buzzing sound. If it wasn't, then it would send out nothing but silence. This could work, he rejoiced. After all, this could basically work as the ones and zeros of computers. If he could somehow program the Unity PS to emit its power only at a certain time, then he could create a complex system that resembled a simple circuit computing system. ChatJK5, do you think this could work? Yes, Michael. Your idea is easy to execute, she said. With her approval, Michael created another Unity PS to experiment with. This time, he requested a little adjustment in the magic theory. Can you make the Unity PS that It took ChatJK5 a few minutes before she was able to come up with an alteration. Then, he started with the experiment. He created 2 identical sets of Unity PS and light bulbs on opposite sides of the field. Then, he approached the light bulb on one of the sets and began to flick it on and off in a very noticeable pattern. On off, and not even a second later, the light bulb on the other side of the field flickered on and off at the same exact pattern and timing. It worked. Michael was able to create a simple communication device. With a little bit more tweaking, he could turn this little experiment into a workable messaging service with the phone. All he needed to do was create a piece of electrical circuitry that translated the signal coming from the Unity PS into a mobile screen that could display letters, images, and a lot of other things. He proved that text messaging could work with this phone. But he didn't want that to be the full extent of its capabilities. He wanted voice calls, video chats, camera captures, and other stuff that a normal modern phone could do. Of course, that was easier said than done. The complexity of that technology was not something that could be done overnight, if you were a human, which ChatJK5 was not. Creating technology. Completed. A few seconds later, Michael felt a cool sensation wash over his head as multiple blueprints and circuit boards appeared in his mind. It was a phone, though not the modern one that he was used to. This iteration of the phone could be considered as a brick in terms of its thickness and size. Creating a much slimmer and more complex phone will require more experiments and iterations with the Unity PS, ChatJK5 said, disappointed in herself. Hey, I'm not complaining. This phone is already amazing. This phone had a keyboard on the bottom, a white screen at the top, and a small trackpad in the middle. According to the blueprints ChatJK5 gave him, this phone could send and receive text messages without problem. In this iteration, each Unity PS inside the phone was registered with a unique identification number. So as long as someone used that number, they could communicate with each other through text. Michael saw a 3D representation of the phone appear in his vision. And as he turned it around, he saw a single camera lens that was almost as wide as the phone itself. You implemented a camera in the phone? How'd you do that? He only proved that text messaging could work with the Unity power source. He didn't know yet how to make videos and photos on the phone. It's easy. I was able to use the magic theory from the Unity clones as a foundation on the changes I made on the Unity power source. I used the eyes on the clones and changed it so that the Unity PS could accept visual information. I did the same with the ears and the mouth, allowing the phone to be able to process sounds and make noise. Suffice it to say, Michael was very impressed. She was able to create a fully functional phone in less than a few hours. This was impressive because the phone used a completely different form of technology than the modern ones in his previous life. I have to make this right now, he decided. Without further ado, he exited the pocket dimension and teleported himself to the Dwarven Forge in the nation of Reborn. There, he greeted the dwarves and helped himself to the numerous raw ores and materials they had in store. He picked out some copper, aluminum, iron, and other alloys he needed. And finally, he took with him a small piece of mithril. Now, this phone could work totally fine without mithril. However, if he wanted to commercialize it to the rest of the world, he had to make sure that it wouldn't accidentally explode after a few bumps and scratches. After all, it did use Unity as its battery. So, he needed to encase the Unity PS in mithril to make it foolproof. Chapter 8:11. First phone. Boss Michael greeted one of the dwarves. Michael greeted the greasy dwarf by locking arms together, a sign of friendship in dwarven culture. Oh, new project? The dwarf asked, seeing the piles and piles of ores and minerals he had on the desk. Michael nodded. Yep, I'm planning this to be our new moneymaker, but it's still a work in progress. Well, if you need any help, you can count on us, boss, said the dwarf, flexing his biceps. Michael would take him up on his offer, of course. He'd need to manufacture phones by the thousands at the very least, and that was not something that he could do by himself. How are your abilities in making mithril? Creating that mithril was not something that just any dwarf could do. It required talent and practice. Lots of it. It's doing all right, boss. We're nowhere near your level. But we can make a few more if we're incentivized with beer. Ha ha ha. Michael then picked up a small rectangular piece of mithril from the pile. You think you and your guys can make this 1,000 times a day? The dwarf examined the mithril box that was going to encase the Unity power source closely. Then he shook his head. Producing that much mithril, we can't do it alone. We'll need the help of our brothers in the kingdom, the dwarf said. I guess I gotta visit Byru, Michael thought. He thanked the dwarf for his help and returned to his drone's pocket dimension. There, he began to follow the instructions given to him by ChatJK5. Multiple magic circles appeared around him as he manipulated each or with earth magic, bending and morphing them to the exact specifications that the blueprint needed. Then, he created the screen using silicon, making it clear and easy to read. Behind that screen were these tiny LED lights that allowed the phone to create images in crystal clear quality. After that, he added speakers and a microphone system for calls and messaging. Then, he created small metal keys with a customized letter imprinted above it, showing this alphabet of this world's language. After that, he manipulated multiple circular glasses to float above the phone, before assembling them in the back of the phone to create the intricate camera technology that ChatJK5 created. This process took time, but it was very easy after using magic. Then finally, he took the Unity power source and safely encased it into a rectangular box of mithril. Those two were what took the most space within the phone, but there was nothing he could do about it. Making the Unity PS smaller would either result in its power output to go down to zero, or become extremely volatile to explosions. With all of the pieces finally done, all that was left was to connect them to each other. Moment of truth, he said nervously as he started to connect each circuit into the mithril. What's good about mithril was that it was a completely good conductor for the energy output of the Unity power source. All he had to do was solder each connection to the mithril box and they would get automatically powered by Unity. Once that was done, he assembled all pieces together and connected the back half of the phone to the front. And with a satisfying click, he created this world's very first phone. The screen suddenly lit up with a white light, before the word Reborn appeared in bold letters and accompanied by a grand music orchestra of horns that echoed from the speaker. Nice touch, he complimented ChatJK5. Smiley face. A few seconds later, the Reborn title dissolved and Michael saw three icons on the top left. The one on the further left was the image of a camera lens and the word camera on the bottom. The one next to that was the image of a speech bubble and the word messages written below. Right next to that icon was the image of a person speaking with visual reverberations from their mouth. On the bottom, it said, calls. These were the first three apps for the phone, which was very basic. He was planning on adding more in the future, but this would suffice for now. He used the trackpad above the keyboard and picked the camera button, seeing a visual appear on the screen. It showed the image in front of him in HD quality, and with a single key press, he captured the image. The camera worked perfectly. After that, he decided to test out the phone's capabilities for calls and texts. To do that, he created two more phones to experiment with, which of course were first registered to the cube. Then he pressed the Messages app and navigated through to the top of the screen. He inputted the number 0002, meaning that he was intending to send a message to the second phone that he created. Testing, testing. Then he pressed send. A second later, a satisfying chime came from his second phone before a notification appeared on the screen. Message from 0001. Testing, testing. It worked. It's working. Michael couldn't help but rejoice after seeing this. He built a phone with his own two hands. But of course, he didn't let his excitement get in the way of his testing. He then tested out the call app on the phone and dialed the number 0003. A second later, his third phone began to ring and vibrate just like a real phone. He picked up the phone and said, hello, before hearing his voice echoing through both of the phones. It was working. After confirming that it worked, he decided to test out its limits. He teleported out of his pocket dimension and landed directly in Castell's office back in the nation of Reborn. Young master, Castell blurted out. She immediately got up from her seat and bowed. Take this, he said, giving her the first phone before teleporting away. This left Castell completely confused. She stared at the brick in her hands, wondering what kind of item Michael had come up with this time. Then it vibrated. Ring ring. Chapter 812. Plan for phone. Castell looked at the brick in her hands and saw the words. Incoming call from 0002. Press any button to accept. Confused, Castell had no choice but to follow the strange letters on the screen by pressing a key on the keyboard. And immediately the call connected. Hello. A muted voice echoed from the phone. Castell seemed to recognize the tone it came from. That was from her young master. She put the phone closer to her ears and finally heard the call loud and clear. Hello. Castell? Can you hear me? Young master. Are you speaking to me? That's right. Now, can you please press the trackpad button on top of the keyboard? Castell squinted her eyes as she navigated the strange and alien keys in the phone. Finally, after a minute of fumbling through the keys, she was able to push the button as Michael suggested. And suddenly, the image on the screen changed, followed by a notification. Video call accepted. Castell saw Michael appear on the screen, startling her. Young master. That's you, she exclaimed. Michael waved back at her. He was in the pocket dimension of his drone, looking at the front camera of the phone and seeing Castell's confused face reflected on the screen. The phone was working exactly as he intended. Even though the phones were separated through a different dimensional space, they still worked properly without being laggy or choppy. The image and sound were crystal clear. Young master, what is this? How can I see you in this brick? This is called a phone, Castell. I'll teach you how to use it. He began to instruct her on the uses of the phone, such as its capability to call, text, and take pictures. I see. This is amazing, young master. This doesn't use magic. I can already see it becoming extremely popular to the masses. As expected, as soon as Castell got the gist of the phone, she immediately thought about its potential in the markets. The fact that it was self-sustained, needing no battery nor magic, meant that anyone could use it and could cater to a wider market. Can you use the phone properly now? He asked Castell. He saw her squint at the phone a few times, a habit she had whenever she had trouble trying to understand something. It was a bit overwhelming at first, young master, especially with the numerous keys on the keyboard. But once you explained it, I think I could handle it myself. This was one of his concerns. The phone wasn't intuitive to the people of this world. This was essentially their first interaction with technology that advanced, unlike the people from his previous world who were able to go from rotary telephone to wireless telephone, and finally to a smartphone. Castell was very smart, but even she took a little bit more fumbling around before she got used to the controls. And she had the benefit of him guiding her throughout the entire time. The average person won't have those advantages. I'm glad I didn't add too many features on the phone. Being too complex would hinder the phone's assimilation to society. It was good that it only had 3 features for now. There was always time to add more in the future once people got used to the controls. After testing the signal, Michael returned back to Castell's office and asked about her opinion on the phone. What do you think? Can I sell this? Castell fervently nodded her head. Yes, young master. I have already thought of a marketing strategy to ensure the phone's success. She then moved towards the blackboard on her wall and removed the satin sheet covering it. A complex PowerPoint presentation held up by pins and strings connected to each other was revealed. It showed graphs, market research data, distribution channels, and other such things that detailed an almost 10-year plan to produce and sell phones. When did you do this? Forgive me, young master. I was only able to cobble up something basic since I only had a few minutes while you were gone. Michael was once again reminded why Castell was the CEO of the Reborn company. Her talents in business were next to no one. While they were talking on a call earlier, she asked him questions about the phone's manufacturing materials offhandedly. He thought she was just making conversation, but he didn't think she was actually already trying to calculate everything about its production. In her presentation, he saw a bunch of numbers tallying up the expenses that the phone would need to be produced. This included the ores and materials, the labor for the production, as well as the mithril needed. Mithril is the biggest cost of our production, Castell said, pointing at her calculations. If we were to base the price through the black market, then each phone would need 800 sanddollars worth of mithril for production. And if we were to add the materials, the labor, etc., then we can safely assume that the total expense for a single phone would be at 1,000 sanddollars each. But because of its rarity and commercial value, I think we can price it at 10,000 sanddollars apiece. That was an insane profit margin. Are you sure we can price it that high? Castell nodded confidently. Of course. In truth, we could have priced it at 20,000 or even 30,000. The mithril and the unlimited battery alone would make it extremely valuable to the market. But if we price it that high, only a select few can purchase our phones. In the short term, this is good for profit. But in the long term, it will kill our progress. We need a lot of people to become used to our phones. It should be an everyday necessity. Once she put it that way, Michael was convinced. After all, he was planning on copying the tactics of phone companies from his previous life. He was going to release a new phone with updated specs every so often. That way, those that were already used to the phones will be more inclined to buy another, making the previous version of the phone a lot cheaper and more affordable for others. That price looks good, he said. It's the same as a single drop of SU or 1 kilogram of Godforge piece. In his opinion, the price was expensive, but not to the point where it was unaffordable. Still, he had to get a second opinion. And who better to ask that than a royal who was deeply intertwined with the tastes and opinions of the masses. Meanwhile, back in Metropolis, a royal motorized carriage finally reached its destination atop a plateau. We're back at the castle, milady, said a butler. Yet even after announcing that they were finally home after months and months of being away, the person inside refused to go out. This was none other than Duchess Regina, the royal in charge of Metropolis in its entirety. Despite that title, the Duchess hadn't been performing the duties of someone befitting of her title. She was too busy enjoying her life back in the nation of Reborn. But now she's back. She was away from that paradise, and back to this backwards territory without any electricity or plumbing. Chapter 813, Regina's Conflict. If she could simply live out her days drinking beer, watching exciting baseball games, and enjoying the fireworks show every night, then she would do so without a question. But unfortunately, her title as the Duchess necessitated her actually going back to her own territory and managing it like a royal should. Duchess? We have arrived, said her butler. I know, she replied exasperatedly. She opened the carriage door and exited, finding herself in the expansive mansion she had with a view overlooking the entirety of Metropolis. This was a view that many people would die for. But for the Duchess, she would exchange this entire castle for a simple house back in the nation of Reborn if she could. She sighed, pushing her feet to go inside. As soon as she opened the door, she felt nothing but silence. Her children and her grandchildren remained back in that paradise, enjoying themselves to their heart's content. She even offered Harry or Elizabeth the crown so that she wouldn't have to return here, but they declined. They were happy and content with their new lives there. Her grandchildren made friends, so she couldn't ask them to go with her. It wouldn't be fair to them. So, she remained in her large castle alone, forced by her duty to take care of Metropolis lest it fall to ruin. The first few nights were the hardest. She missed visiting the famous tree houses with her family and watching the parades down on the streets. She missed visiting the taverns and drinking beer with the dwarves like a normal person. She missed the comfort that the nation of Reborn offered her. The worst part was the headache that she had to endure as all the paperwork finally caught up to her. Duchess, you have a decision to make regarding our policy here. Multiple companies are requesting for you to approve of this. Duchess. You have meetings tomorrow till next week, Duchess. We can't delay it any longer. In her absence, a lot of her duties had piled up. This was especially so because of the appearance of New Sparta. It caused a lot of companies to make moves in order to ensure that they wouldn't fall behind in the race to get the beastfolk's attention. I have to thank Alaric, she said, massaging her temples as she looked through her old letters. He already arranged for the companies in Metropolis to stand together. She was very familiar with the political ramifications of New Sparta. Metropolis was only the most successful territory in the lower regions of the Queen's region because of their connections to the conglomerates and the two big organizations. But with the appearance of the beastfolks, there would be a great shift in the rankings. If Metropolis didn't stand together to compete in New Sparta, then the other territories could finally catch up to them. They would lose their top spot. Because of that, people and companies would leave Metropolis and find better pastures, further exacerbating the decline. How's the situation in New Sparta, 001? She asked. Suddenly, a man wearing an all-black attire that obscured half of his face appeared kneeling beside the Duchess. He was part of her secret service, her eyes and ears in the places where she cannot be. The smaller territories have carved up their own space in New Sparta. Some of them have made allies with the beastfolks, while some are still fighting to take that chance. 001 replied. How about those two? The Duchess asked, her implication obvious. Bonacore town has made a decent headway. Some chose to ally with factions from Metropolis to get a better shot with the beastfolks, while some chose to simply stand aside. The Duchess turned to look at 001. And Zenthaven City? They have already allied with most of the beastfolks, 001 replied. Regina pursed her lips. Looks like the Auberts really are on their way back to the top, she grumbled. Although there was no bad blood between her and Zenthaven City, she knew that they, and the Auberts specifically, were their greatest competition within New Sparta. If they were to reach great success in New Sparta, they could potentially take back their past title as a conglomerate. This would put Metropolis in their shadows, which her pride couldn't take. It reflected badly on her if Metropolis lost their place as the best territory in the region. And with that thought, her eyes turned serious, a competitive fire burning in her pupils. In the back of her mind, plans and schemes commenced. For a second, 001 stared at the Duchess. Her expression brought him back to the olden days where Metropolis had yet to become the territory it was now. Back then, the Metropolis army was led by a great general whose fist was as mighty as a draconian, wits as sharp as the Magus, and courage as deep as the seven seas. People feared her, and that was how she led Metropolis into the top. As unfortunate as it was, time, comfort, and familiarity had dulled this general's sword. And once she had a family, her priority turned from conquering to preserving. But now 001 was seeing a hint of that fearless general once again. Was the Duchess about to release her fangs once more? But just then, a knock rang out from the door. Duchess, there's a letter for you, said the butler. After asking for permission, the butler entered the Duchess' office room and found her all alone, hunched in her desk overlooking stacks of paperwork. Who is it from? The Duchess asked him. Is it from the beastfolks? The butler didn't answer and kept a subtle smile on his face as he gave her the letter. It's from your grandchildren, the butler said. The Duchess' eyes softened as she opened the letter. Grandma, are you back at the castle yet? Hope your journey was fine. Don't worry about us because we're being fine and healthy here. Don't listen to him, Grammy. He's been drinking soda non-stop. His teeth are crooked. It's not. Yours are. The letter was nonsensical and scribbled so sloppily that it could barely even be legible. Despite that, a single tear dropped onto the paper, staining it wet. Duchess Regina couldn't help but laugh and cry as she imagined those troublesome grandchildren of hers wrestle their pens away from each other writing this letter. She took a deep breath. This gave her the levity she needed in these stressful times. After a pause, she started to wonder. Was it so bad if Metropolis stopped becoming the best territory in the region? She could retire back in the nation of Reborn and let New Sparta pass her by. There was no reason for her to keep struggling. What would this bring her? More fame? More prestige? If she had to sacrifice seeing her grandchildren grow up, then it wouldn't be worth anything. Duchess? Asked 001, reappearing again after the butler was gone. We still need your signature on these letters. There are people waiting for your appearance in New Sparta. Regina looked at the stack of paperwork in her desks, and then back to the letter in her hands. She opened her mouth, about to say something, then they heard another knock from the door. Knock knock. Yo, Duchess. You there? Michael said, opening the door. Chapter 814, Easily Solvable Problem. Michael opened the door, seeing the Duchess with a conflicted look on her face. Oh, sorry. Are you busy? The Duchess gave him a look. Yes, very busy. But I can humor you for a bit if you truly want my attention, she said with a smile on her face. Michael scoffed. Humor me? Am I kid or what? She looked at him again with a deadpan face. You are. He went silent for a second, forgetting his own age. Ha ha ha. Right, he said. So, what do you want? He approached her. I just need a little bit of advice, that's all. Advice from me? That'll cost a lot, you know? Are you ready to pay such a steep price? Just so you know, I'm only taking RD soda as compensation, she said, gulping a half-finished drink at her table. Ooh, now I'm hesitating, he said. If you want my advice, then you gotta help me first. She then took out a paper from one of the stacks in her desk and showed it to Michael. He squinted and saw that it was a letter containing a report of what had been happening in New Sparta. You know that New Sparta is very competitive nowadays, right? Hopefully, you're doing your best to represent Metropolis against the other territories. He tilted his head. Not yet. I tried working on it, but I got busy. She shook her head and clicked her tongue. We need you, Michael. You are our secret weapon. Every single one of the companies there will be preparing for the legacies and the major and minor factions. But they don't know about you. This will be our advantage in the All Tournament at the end of the year, she said. Because of how powerful they are, they became a target for most companies. Many were now preparing to fight them for the All Tournament, doing scouting and reports to see their weaknesses and disadvantages. This was happening to everyone, including the Rising Six and the rest of the minor factions. Except for Michael. Not a lot people know about Michael and the amazing Reborn company. And that was on purpose. Alaric made sure to contain any news about them to make sure that Michael would remain as an underdog, someone who was underestimated. Essentially, they wanted Michael to do the exact same thing that he did to them to the other territories. If you aren't doing anything, then I suggest that you go ahead and contact the werewolves. I've heard that the Brownbloods are looking for their human allies. They tried to make a deal with the Auberts, but for some reason they failed. This could be your chance. Michael raised his hand. Oh, about that. Just listen first, the Duchess said. You probably won't have a chance to win them over since they are looking for a magnetic swordsman, which you are not, but you can still show them your other capabilities. That was us, he interrupted her. Huh. One of my allies won the swordsman tournament in the Brownblood tribe. The Duchess' jaw remained open as she looked at Michael. You. Then, she shook her head and sighed. I don't know why I'm surprised. Of course you won that. What was I thinking? She said sarcastically. How the hell did you win that? I heard that Mauricio Aubert was in that tournament. Michael shrugged. I don't know. I wasn't there. The Duchess' eyebrows furled together, making it a unibrow. What? Did you use that flying weapon of yours to win while you were away? No, weren't you listening? One of my allies did it. Duchess Regina tried to think back on Michael's circle of friends. But as far as she knew, he didn't have anyone who was a magnetic swordsman. His most trusted guards were those demi-humans. She even remembered one of them who was very fast with the sword. But that wasn't possible. Even with their talents in magic, they couldn't possibly beat Mauricio, even if they had a diva, which was impossible. Right? Then, suspicions arose within the Duchess. She looked at Michael and saw that confident smile of his. No way, right? What? He asked innocently. She squinted at him, but he remained acting clueless. Finally, she sighed and didn't ask any more questions. It was probably better for him and for her sanity if she didn't know. Whatever. I just hope that you can make allies with the Brownbloods, she said. I'll try. You have to, she insisted. Without me, Metropolis will have a hard time staying afloat. So, you have to pick up the slack. He noticed the look of pain in her eyes. What do you mean, without me? The Duchess leaned back on her chair and exhaled. This competition is a young woman's game. And as much as I want to butt heads with those stubborn folk, I have to learn how to let go. This sounds like you're retiring, he said, chuckling. No, he blurted out. You're planning on retiring? The Duchess looked at him and laughed. It's your fault. You made the nation of Reborn too enticing not to live in. Be serious. I am, she replied. Can a duchess even retire? That's not possible, right? She shrugged. The best thing about being the owner of a territory is that I can do whatever I want. So if I want to put down the mantle and give it to somebody else, I can do so as I please. What will happen to Metropolis? What about the people who are depending on you? He asked, trying to convince her to change her mind. They'll most likely be led by someone else. I hope it's going to be Alaric or any of those legacies, as long as they are from Metropolis. But it's also possible that someone else outside will make a play for the territory. Though I doubt you or the others would let that happen. She gave him a certain imperceptible look as she said that, as if suggesting something, but he didn't seem to notice as he was too busy trying to process her decision. Michael took a chair and sat down. He looked up at the Duchess and saw the conflict in her face. She was serious. Are you really giving up? I'm choosing myself this time. I've spent my youth giving it all for Metropolis. Now I hope it'll let me be selfish for one last time. Michael, of course, couldn't accept this. He shook his head, disbelief written on his face. Are you dying or something? No, she replied, offended. I'm still as spry as any of you youths. If I wanted to, I could wipe the floor with you or the other territories in New Sparta. It will become Metropolis 2.0. Then why? The Duchess seemed plenty motivated to keep fighting in New Sparta. She sighed. It's because I want to see my grandchildren grow up. I want to see and talk to them all the time. And I can't do that if I'm managing Metropolis in New Sparta. That's it, Michael complained. If that's your reason, then I'm very glad that I got here in time. You could have made a grave mistake for such an easily solvable problem, he said as he plopped the phone on her desk. Chapter 8:15. One phone call away. Chapter 8:15. One phone call away. The Duchess looked at the strange metallic brick in front of her. What's this? She asked him. Wait right here, he said before teleporting away without even giving her an explanation. Once she was alone, she nervously poked around with the brick, not knowing if it was a bomb or a metallic sculpture. Where the hell did that kid go? But just as she was about to complain, the brick suddenly started vibrating, startling her out of her chair. My goodness! She screamed out, prompting 001 to appear in front of her in a defensive stance. Ring ring. 001 approached the phone, looking at the words written on the screen. Video call coming from 003. Please press any button to accept. He carefully picked up the phone and showed it to the Duchess. They both trusted Michael enough to know that this strange item wasn't going to hurt them in any way, shape, or form. Should we press one of the buttons? She asked him. 001 nodded and pushed his thumb on the keyboard, pressing multiple buttons at the same time. As soon as he did, a satisfying chime echoed from the phone as the signal connected. Hello? Duchess, are you there? Of course, Duchess Regina would recognize that voice anywhere. Michael? Where are you? Just then, she saw 001's eyes grow wide as he looked at the screen. She had never seen him so surprised at anything. Duchess, he said, turning the phone to face her. Finally, she saw the image displayed on the screen. It was Michael, waving at her with an endless desert horizon in the background. Michael, is that you? Why are you there in the box? Are you trapped? She immediately urged 001 to break the metallic brick and save Michael from his imprisonment. Wait, don't do that. You have to see this first. Duchess, take the phone. She nervously took the phone from 001, trying to peek behind the screen to see if he was hidden somewhere behind it. What? Look, he said, as he pointed the camera towards a large structure in the distance. She saw a creature with a menacing aura, multiple tentacles coming out of its mouth, its height piercing through the skies. And on the speakers, she heard the sounds of screams coming from people whose rides were just about to enter into Cthulhu's mouth. Before she could even process this information, the whole image suddenly turned black. Hey, she can't see you if you're so close to the screen. Oh, sorry bro Michael. Is this enough? Forgive my brother. He's an idiot. No, you're an idiot. Finally, the image lightened as the light finally hit the screen. The Duchess pulled the phone closer to her face. Her eyes began watering as she saw the familiar faces of her grandchildren waving and saying hi to her. My babies, she muttered, hand covering her mouth. Grandma, I can see you. How you doing, Grandma? Look, we're about to go on a roller coaster again. Grandma, are you sad? Why are you crying? Duchess Regina began to laugh, wiping away the tears in her face. Ha ha ha, it's nothing, my dear. I just missed you all. Her 4 grandchildren gave her a big smile. We miss you too, Grandma. Then one of the 2 boys approached the phone and hogged the screen. She could see his ruffled hair unbefitting of a royal in high definition. Don't worry, Grandma. Bro Mike said that we can talk to you, and see you, and chat with you, and laugh with you whenever we want with this phone. Yep. You don't have to miss us, Grandma. We can talk to each other every night and I can tell you all about baseball. Duchess Regina chuckled. I sure will, my dear. Just then, they heard the sounds of metal clanking as the roller coaster finally came to a stop. They were now boarding the new passengers. Ah, we're going to be late. We'll go now, Grandma. Nixie, come say bye to Grandma. A shy mermaid girl appeared on the bottom of the screen, meekly waving her hands. Now boys, don't put Nixie in too much trouble. The Duchess reprimanded them. She's still recovering. She can do just fine, can't you, Nixie? Nixie nodded, before the 2 girls took her hands and began running in the direction of the roller coaster. The boys quickly tried to catch up to them, and the last thing that the Duchess saw was them waving goodbye in the distance. The Duchess took a deep breath and held her chest. Her eyes were red with tears, but her mouth was widened into a smile. Michael, she called out, have you finally changed your mind? He asked her, putting the phone in his face. What is this thing you've made? Michael dropped the call for a second and teleported back into the Duchess' quarters. This is called a phone. As you saw earlier, it can video call, text, and message anyone with another phone regardless of distance. It doesn't require magic or power. It's self-sustaining. The Duchess took the phone in her hands and slotted it in her pockets. You've made something incredible again, she said as she walked towards her cabinets. That I did. Now, this solves your problem, right? You can now continue your work as the Duchess of Metropolis and still be able to see your grandchildren anytime you want. She stopped walking to look at him. Is this what you wanted to ask for advice about? Yes. I'm planning on selling this for 10,000 sand dollars each. That's a good price, right? The Duchess stopped, her eyes deep in thought. Can you make a lot of them? He shook his head. Not yet. I am planning to make a factory once I'm able. So for now, I can't announce it publicly because I can't keep up with the demand. She nodded before kneeling down and opening the drawer. After ruffling through the piles of gems and golden jewelries inside, she finally retrieved a big pouch. And with this bag in her hands, she walked towards Michael and dropped it in front of him. That's 400,000 sand dollars. I want 20 phones, she said. Michael peeked through the opening in the pouch and saw the sand dollars brimming to the top, shining with a gleam. In such a short amount of time, he amassed such a large sum of sand dollars. It was unbelievable. Wait, 20 phones for 400,000. She nodded. Yup, I'm paying you 20,000 sand dollars for each phone because I want you to prioritize its creation. I want me and my family to be the very first people who have phones in their pockets. Michael wasn't going to say no to that. He always needed more sand dollars. And just as he was about to say thank you to her, the Duchess suddenly took him into her embrace. Then, she whispered, thank you. The magnitude of what he did could not be calculated through monetary value. However, it was the least she could do. A few seconds later, she released her embrace and wiped a tear from her eyes. Michael, feeling awkward for a moment, asked, so, you're not retiring anymore, right? The Duchess smiled. I'm still retiring. Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today.